Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. We have Adrian M. Gibson on the show today. Adrian can be found in many different places. We're going to have links to some of the things that he's up to, from his website to his podcast to his new book that's coming out in March. So this is a great episode for anyone who wants to hear about self-publishing and kind of the processes that Adrian has gone through, because he's done this really well. Adrian just knows a lot about science fiction writing, and he talks to a lot of authors just like we do on the show here. We also want to take this time to let you know what's coming up with Tales from the Bridge. Next episode, we're talking about The Thousand Earths by Stephen Baxter. Some of us liked it, some of us didn't. I loved it. I really like this one, but you got to listen to it to find out. So that episode's going to come out next week. Then we talk to Richard K. Morgan. Interesting fella, great conversation about punkisms and all kinds of cool stuff with Richard. So that'll be out in a couple of weeks as well. So we got a lot going on. If you have not subscribed to the show, liked the show, left us a review, told a friend, please do so. We want to keep doing what we do, and of course we're going to, because we love it. We have a passion for it. We love talking about books. But if you have not let us know what you think of the show, do that as well. Email us. We always want to hear from people. Follow us on Facebook. We've got that's where we're old guys, so we talk on Facebook. We have interesting conversations, stupid memes, and all kinds of stuff. So if you want to join in on the conversation, just go to Tales from the Bridge on Facebook. Look for us. We're out there. We want to connect with you, and we're super happy to have you join us today. All right, everyone's waiting for us. Let's make our way over to the bridge. Today we have Adrian M. Gibson, who is a Canadian speculative fiction author, podcaster, and illustrator. He was born in Ontario, Canada, maybe not far from us. We'll find out shortly. But he grew up in British Columbia, so he left, like everyone from Ontario does, eventually at some point in their life. But Adrian studied English literature, and he's worked in music, journalism, restaurants, tattoo studios, clothing stores, and a bevy of odd jobs. So Adrian right now has Sci-Fi Addicts podcast, where he co-hosts with MJ Kuhn. And I'll just throw back to an episode we did with MJ and Peter Watts. We did one of the trivia episodes. So MJ was a lot of fun. And we are very happy to have Adrian. We're going to talk about his latest book, his first book, his debut novel, and about self-publishing and what it's like to emerge as an author, and hear a little bit about podcasting and a few more things. So Adrian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. And I was born in Mississauga.
Okay.
If that narrows it down for you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're Guelph, so we're like 40 minutes away. I guess.
My dad was born in Guelph, so there we go.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, man.
But you're calling from very far away.
I live in Ecuador now. So,
okay.
Yeah. I went to BC and then went to Berlin and then came to Ecuador. So I've just kind of done like my own kind of Bermuda Triangle of long distance.
Nice. That's very cool. Well, set us up with this new book. I've read some of it because you shared some with us, and it's very exciting for sure. You must be excited because this comes out next month on the 19th of March, and it's called Mushroom Blues. So if you could just tell our listeners about the premise of this book to start off, and then we'll get a little deeper into the what you've done to get here.
Sure. So Mushroom Blues is a fungal punk noir police procedural. It's very much rooted in murder mystery traditions and police procedurals and that kind of thing, but it's set in a secondary world full of fungi with mushroom-headed people who have symbiotically merged with mushrooms in the distant past, and how this culture and a human culture clash when there is an invasion and a subsequent occupation. And the story follows Henrietta Hoffman, who's a homicide detective, as she is investigating the mysterious murders and disappearances of fungal children. And to do that, she has to begrudgingly team up with a mushroom-headed beat cop named Koji Nameko, and the two go off around the city of Neokanoko, investigating, interviewing witnesses, and just kind of trying to figure out what has happened. And ultimately, this is a story about Henrietta and her awakening and her acceptance of the reality that she lives in now, but also the trauma that she has succumbed to in the past, and kind of overcoming that and looking towards the future.
So this is extremely original. Like I can't think of any book where we have mushroom people, and the world building happens very quickly in this book. Where did the mushroom idea come from? I'm sure you've been asked this before, but have you done psilocybin mushrooms a lot, and how much did it affect your writing?
Very much so.
I'm
First of all, I will shout out to Jeff Vandermeer, specifically his Ambergris trilogy, which involved fungal people, was a huge inspiration for me. It's a huge inspiration, his whole body of work for everything that I do. Other authors like China Mieville and these kind of new weird authors influenced a lot of what I'm doing. But specifically, a lot of the fungal verse, which is the shared universe in which Mushroom Blues is set in, is kind of a conversation with the Ambergris trilogy, which framed the fungal people as sort of like a hive mind, but kind of mindless and subservient. And they were placed in the role of the antagonists. Whereas in my story, I'm placing the fungal people. They do exist in a sort of hive mind kind of way, but they are very human in their emotions and the way that they evoke community and different aspects. So I'm kind of trying to have a dialogue with Jeff Vandermeer and humanizing fungal people and bringing in the complexity of humans and what they do to basically just like mess everything up in that context. And the fungal verse uh, was inspired, yes, by Jeff Vandermeer, but also by a dream that I had of a gigantic mushroom, bioluminescent mushroom in a forest towering over the trees. And that kind of started me on this journey where I was exploring this fictional world of mushrooms and mushroom people and architecture and all these different aspects of how mushrooms could potentially better humanity and better our real lives. But I realized that that direction that I was going, despite the amount of like the insane amount of research that I was going into and the amount of illustration that I'd done to kind of flesh out this world, it was kind of directionless. And so that's when I brought in elements of murder mystery and cyberpunk and police procedurals to ground the story in something interesting while also being able to explore those different elements in ways that were much more subtle. And yes, psilocybin and psychedelics have played a huge part in my life. The last 15 years of my life, I've been exploring with mushrooms, with LSD, DMT, and different things like that, which have really helped me in terms of opening up my mind to what consciousness is capable of, what creativity is capable of, but also sort of broadening my spectrum of empathy and understanding of different peoples and different cultures.
You said something earlier. You kind of positioned the book as fungal punk, which I haven't heard before. So, and I'm starting to get an understanding of it with hearing you talk. Is this a term that you've come up with, or would you say this is an emerging subgenre that has a broader scope than maybe many of us realize?
I think fungal punk could be defined as something that's been around for a while, but I kind of came up with it as a bit of like a inside joke type thing because I love different sort of like punk subgenres and how authors can kind of have fun with that. Some people hate it, and that's totally fine. But I think it's fun to kind of play around with that and think about ways in which the punk ethos can be applied to different things. And when I say punk, I'm thinking a lot of cyberpunk. Um, some people might hear punk and think more of steampunk. Um, and I spoke to Ken Liu about this recently, where he kind of developed this idea of silk punk for his Dandelion Dynasty series. And for me, it's like you can have fun with these terminologies, and you can also be intelligent and thoughtful about them at the same time. And for me, fungal punk is about fungi being the sort of route to think about and discuss so many issues, whether they're socio-political or cultural or what have you, and just allow those conversations to bloom and flourish. And fiction works really well in that sense to be able to be that point of activation for people to think about things and have ideas take root in their mind and then let it, carry on in their hands and their imaginations and whatnot.
I think that's no. I love the idea of churning the definition of punk to that, because you create a space, right? By calling something fungal punk, now you create a space for people to explore. You legitimize it. You give some boundaries in the same way that you added a crime procedural, right? You grounded in a so you could find a path through which to navigate this new space. That's what punk's about. It's about opening things up and making it okay to go to this new space, explore it, and build on it, and go from there. That's the most punk rock thing ever, right? Like, isn't that the
Exactly.
point? Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
it's like giving yourself room for experimentation and allowing that experimentation the space to fail, and also the space to succeed in ways in which you can sort of navigate what's working and what's not. And that's something that I've always loved about Self Pub is the fact that it is kind of like the most punk aspect of the publishing world, and that self pub authors can be more experimental in terms of how they approach their stories, but they can also be more experimental in how they approach genre or marketing or all these different facets of the author experience. And so it's kind of like I get to explore the punk ethos in my work, and I also get to explore the punk ethos in my more entrepreneurial side and how I'm approaching publishing and how I'm approaching marketing and that stuff.
I know. I think that's it. You're right. Like it's a creative space. It initiates a creative space that promotes evolution and a path and a progress somewhere. No, I'm with you. How have you connected this into all the other things that you do? You're a podcaster, you're a writer, a traveler. Like, where does this sort of fit in the writing and your path sort of fit into the overall space that you're occupying?
I mean, it's just kind of a natural extension of everything I've done. Uh, I started my podcast in order to learn as much as I could. I started the podcast to bring in professional voices and ask them all the burning questions that I had. So it kind of started in a bit of a selfish way where I'm like, I just want to talk to all these amazing people. But I think podcasting and in combination, the SFF sphere and the people who exist in it are all very open to discussion and sharing everything that they've learned. And through that, I've made incredible friends. I've met a ton of amazing authors, and I've learned just an inexorable amount about publishing, whether it's traditional publishing, self publishing, the craft of writing, all these different facets. And so those two things really merged naturally. Like writing was just kind of a natural extension of everything that I was doing with the podcast. And, through that, I met MJ, and now we're really, really good friends, and we get to co host this podcast together. And at the same time, I'm able to bring different backgrounds of my own experience in terms of illustration and graphic design. Felix Ortiz did the cover for my book, but I did the typography and graphic design for it. I've done all the graphic design for the interior of the book. And then I used to be a music journalist and love music. And two of my friends from Sweden have actually created a full 8-track soundtrack for Mushroom Blues to accompany it with really beautiful atmospheric ambient soundscapes. It's absolutely beautiful. So I'm able to bring all these different facets of my life into this single project. And even though it's a self-published book, I feel like I've had a very supportive community of friends and authors and musicians coming together in order to make this thing happen.
Yeah, like so let's stay on the self-publishing a bit here. We do have a lot of aspiring authors that listen to our show that reach in all the time, reach out to us quite often. So can you just tell us about that process? Is it write the book, get the book edited, start designing it, and then a release date? Is it because I mean, so often we see these self-published books, and it looks like someone wrote it once and said, "That's it. There's my book," and then went on an app and got the cover done real quick and put it on for $30 on Amazon, and it doesn't. No one really buys it. What's the? It does not look like you did any of that, or perhaps you did plus more. But your website's gorgeous. You just said that you're a graphic designer. The book itself does not look self-published. It looks really, it looks quite professional. So tell us about that process. And did you do something different, or is it as simple as what you just said? There's more collaboration because of the connections you've made with people.
I think the connections that I made with people have given me the opportunity to understand ways in which you can approach self-publishing from a bit more of a half-assed standpoint. You can do that approach, the minimalist approach, where you're getting a very cheap cover. The typography and the design looks equally meh and mediocre kind of thing. There are people who self-publish without going through the process of editing. But for me and all the people that I've met and good friends of mine, Ryan Cahill and Rob J. Hayes specifically, were very helpful in terms of laying out some of the harsh truths of self-publishing, some of the things that can end up with you just existing in the bottom of the barrel, the digital barrel that is Amazon or any of the online platforms that sell ebooks or audiobooks or whatever. And so they were very clear with me about things like, if you're going to get a good artist, first of all, it is beneficial to get a good artist to do your cover, because then you're going to have the best first impression that people can have with your book. But if you get a good artist and you get someone who's really shitty at design or typography to do it, then you're wasting good art. And so it's kind of like thinking about all these things in combination of, how do I want to best give a first impression of my book? Good cover with good typography and good sort of design work and all that. How do I want to market myself? Have a good author website, maybe start a newsletter, all these different ways that you can engage. How do I want to present myself publicly? How do you engage on social media? And so I think the successful self-published authors tend to approach it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, where they're wearing multiple different hats at the same time, but they understand the importance of which hat to wear at which time as well. When to be the author, when to be the marketer, when to be the editor or the designer or what have you, and just allowing that to guide you along the path without necessarily burdening yourself too much in one aspect of it. It's all about balance, and it's all about presenting yourself in the best way possible. Because if you just half-ass it, people are going to look at your book and think immediately, that looks half-assed. What's the quality of the book inside going to be? If the outside and the way that the author presents themselves, or the way that they present their work, all of it trickles down, and the judgment trickles down. Like, when it comes to self-pub, people do judge books by their cover.
Oh yeah.
Because they're seeing it as a thumbnail on Amazon. And so if they don't want to click on that, you've already lost a sale. So
you would say it's good. You don't just come out with a book. You've got to have a bit of financial backing. You've got to be able to put money in. You got to spend money to make money, and that's the reality that a lot of self-published authors aren't willing to accept. I think in some ways they want to write the book and think that book will be good enough that all of a sudden people are buying they've sold 1,000 copies.
Yeah.
You've got to spend some to make some.
Yeah. I mean, there are very baseline things that you have to be aware of in terms of the investment. You don't have to go crazy with marketing and all that kind of stuff with advertisements. You can focus on a cover, a good cover and a good editor. And those are the two fundamentals that will allow you to build a good self-published book on top. Because I haven't spent a dime in terms of promotion. I've just used the resources that I have available to me in terms of the bloggers that I know, the people in the blogging community, the podcasters that I know, the booktubers that I know, and I sent them emails and just talked to them about the potential
Hmm.
to do something like this. And I set up a book tour. In reality, that book tour is just something that I put together because of the community that I've built around me. So it's really important to put yourself out there and to not be afraid about asking questions, even if it's just an email to somebody you've never met before. Take that chance. Most people are kind, and the worst they're going to say is, sorry, we don't have time in our schedule, or et cetera, et cetera. But usually it's going to be a kind no. There's also a chance it could be a yes. So,
When you look back at the sort of journey that you've taken to get to this point, is there one sort of key turning point that you're particularly grateful for, or really sort of put you on the path where you're on now?
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune into 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
yeah. Joining Fanfi Addict, which is a book blog, a science fiction and fantasy and horror book blog. I started on Twitter and was just kind of like slowly immersing myself in the book community over there. And I started to see certain names pop up again and again. But with my background in music journalism, I was like, I would like to just do some blogging about books and see where it takes me. And it just so happened that Fanfi Addict was the first one that I wrote. And David Walters, the founder of that blog, wrote me back. We had a call where both of us had our kids. Like, I had my kid on the call and he had his kid, but we were able to just get to know each other. And that was the beginning of the snowball sort of like slowly rolling down the hill. And 3 months after that, I started SFF Addicts. After that, I helped him with TBRCon, which involved a ton of authors. And then building SFF Addicts just kept growing. We did TBRCon again, which I directed in last year in 2023. And that was massive. We started to get sponsors. We started to bring in more authors and podcasters and booktubers, and just keep it going. And I knew that it was the right time to push forward with my writing and take advantage of the position that I was in. If I had not written him, who knows what would have happened, but I'm very glad that I took that opportunity and got over my fear and just said, I'm going to write him and see what he says. And that single decision to write that email changed my life.
Amazing. Something that's very obvious with talking to you right now, Adrian, is there's two factors here, and it's to having the passion for something and then the ambition. And like I said, we get so many emerging authors or self-published authors that reach out to us, and some that probably just listen and we never hear from them. And for any listeners out there, you really just have to do it. And what I think you're showing us, Adrian, or telling us is just that nonstop pedaling forward. And I think that's if you could just speak to some of our listeners or just people in general, even if you're not writing a book but you want to get started on something, could you mind just speaking to them or even me a little bit here about just having the ambition and moving forward and seeing what you want and going for it? Because I think so many people, they want something but they just don't go for it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get it if you don't.
Exactly. Tristan, you need some motivation, buddy. Yeah, I mean, I have pretty much in my entire adult life, other than a few select occasions, like at the top you mentioned that I worked in a clothing store, but other than that, it's like I was a music journalist, but that was entirely freelance and was something that I was studying English literature, and I just wanted to utilize my language skills and my writing skills in a way that was satisfying me creatively beyond academia. And I just took that chance and went with my gut. And I feel like my entire adulthood is led by me following my gut instinct. You know, if there's some like microflora, some microfungi down in there that's just kind of like nudging me forward a little bit, well, thank you to all those little creatures. But it has led me to doing things that I never believed I would have done. You know, as a music journalist, I was paid to travel. I was able to go to music festivals in New York, in Washington, in all these different places because I took that chance and said, I want to write about music. As a tattoo artist, when I lived in Berlin, I took that chance to start tattooing because a friend of mine just pulled all the machines and equipment out of his backpack and he asked me if I wanted one. And I said, can I do it myself? And that led me to a 7-year career as a tattoo artist, self-employed. I did work at a few tattoo studios here and there, but moving to Ecuador and in Quito, I opened my own tattoo studio. And so it's like, if you have the desire to do something, the only thing that's stopping you is you. And so if you continue to put impediments in front of yourself, it means that thing is not worthwhile enough to you to push past the barriers that you set in your own mind. And so if you just give yourself the chance to work past it, it's like exercising or losing weight. You have to be consistent and you have to give yourself the opportunity to push past those initial discomforts in order to understand the beauty and the power of this thing that you want to do. You finish a workout and you feel great. And those like first 2 minutes where you're like, I don't really want to do it, blah, blah, blah. You come up with all these stupid excuses in your head and you don't do it. You're going to feel worse when you don't go, as opposed to pushing through that initial discomfort, doing the thing, and then seeing the end result. And then once you build up that ritualization of that particular thing, it almost becomes second nature. And those discomforts start to go away because your brain has been trained to say, this thing makes me feel good. And so you're more likely to step into it every day. You're more likely to seek the reward that you get from completing another chapter or finishing that drawing that you wanted to do, or going to the gym and doing the exercise and going and showering afterwards and leaving and feeling super fucking good. But if you just don't allow yourself to do it, you're never going to get there. You know, you're never going to succeed in the things that you want to do if you don't give yourself the strength and perseverance to push through the shitty beginning, because the beginning is always terrible. But once it becomes ritual, once your passion starts to supersede your hangups and your discomforts, that's when you know you're doing something that you really love.
If I had to identify a perfect answer to a question, that might be it. That's perfectly put, in my opinion. Well done. I want to make sure that our listeners know where to find you. Where can they find your book? Where can they find your podcast? Where can they find your website? All of it.
Yeah. You can find me pretty much anywhere on social media at Adrian M. Gibson. My website is also adrianmgibson.com. You can head there. You can buy merch on my online store, all the stuff that I've designed myself, but it's available in different countries around the world through print on demand. And you can check MJ and I out on SFF Addicts, Spotify in video, YouTube in video, and all the different podcast platforms in audio. So that comes out every Tuesday. You can catch us there. And yeah, don't don't feel afraid to shoot me a message on like Instagram or Twitter or wherever. If you have questions, just hit me up. And Mushroom Blues is out on March 19th. You can get that in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. I'll be recording the audiobook myself, so you can listen to my voice for, you know, good like 10 plus hours. But the soundtrack from the book will also be included in the audiobook as sort of transition music, as set pieces and stuff like that. So
Nice.
hopefully that breaks up the monotony of my voice a little bit. But
Nice.
I'm
And so,
excited.
yeah, listeners, there will be links in the show notes to websites and socials that Adrian just mentioned. So take a look in there and go visit and go look at some stuff. I want to end this on something a little bit fun because you said you were a music journalist. What band is most sci-fi to you? Because we've talked about this a little bit before. Because I say, like, I've always thought like Radiohead. Some people say like the techno, the Daft Punk. Is Radiohead sci-fi music?
it depends on what genre.
What
of
what
sci-fi.
era?
Yeah. Like
the
for
Kid
me,
A, Amnesiac.
that for me is like pure, you know, like atmospheric dystopia is Radiohead. Daft Punk is like sci-fi anime kind of vibes, and I adore Daft Punk, and I had the pleasure of seeing them live in 2007 for their live tour, which was one of like
Nice.
the highlights of my life. I don't know, there are just so many bands that encapsulate sci-fi really well for me. But this particular book, I can speak to which two musicians were heavily on repeat throughout the process of writing Mushroom Blues. One was Brian Eno, who is,
Nice.
I would consider more like a composer than anything else.
And producer, yeah, like
He is absolutely incredible, and some of like the best ambient albums in existence. And he's been producing unbelievable music for decades. So you can go back into like the 70s and find ridiculously good albums from Brian Eno, but specifically Ambient 2, Plateau of Mirrors is just chef's kiss. So good. Another one is, I believe they're a Swedish electronic duo, but they're called Carbon Based Lifeforms, which is also very fitting for Mushroom Blues and the Fungalverse in that world. But they have just a series of incredibly beautiful atmospheric albums. World of Sleepers is incredible. But yeah, those two were on repeat for a lot of what I was doing. And my friends from Sweden, the ones who made the album, they are really big fans of Carbon Based Lifeforms, for instance. And even one of them is my best friend, and the other I met through this, but he's a good friend of my friend. And so it's kind of like this perfect mutual connection. And I asked him, like, I want you to make music for this book, because he's seen it since the beginning. And he was like, I'll get back to you tomorrow. I have to ask somebody something. And so he came back to me the next day and he's like, I want to collaborate with a friend on this. And he sent me a photo from this friend's notebook. It's just a notebook full of different ideas, different concepts for music, for albums, whatever. And he had one that just said Mycelium Concept Album. And I was like, this is just serendipity that,
Nice.
you know, these people from across the world are able to collaborate on something, but then they have this like mutual fascination with mushrooms.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and taking time out of your schedule for us and sharing this awesome book with us. We're really looking forward to your release in March and seeing more from you, and and maybe having you back on for trivia if you're down for it.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Adrian. It was really great to talk to you. We're going to connect again with Adrian sometime down the road. So check the show notes for all links for everything with Adrian, from his own website to the podcast and other things that he's up to. Thank you so much for joining us today. Until next time.